Thank you. It is lovely to be here. And also a really enjoyable little chat about one-of-one art to get you guys warmed up for the topic. Is sitting better? Sitting's nice. The chair's still warm from the last guy, so that's kind of nice. No, we're just going to chill and talk about the different intersections of art and NFTs. Also, guys, I don't have a timer, so just like come up and stare at me when I need to end, okay? Because I can ramble for a very long time. We're going to talk about some of the different aspects. Oh, here we go. Very professional. We're going to talk about some of the different aspects of one-of-one art and how it intersects with traditional art. So that also includes creators, collectors, and a few different interesting examples, hopefully. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself because maybe it's more relevant. I don't know. I studied fine art. I am an artist, a traditional artist. I also run the NFT Club Berlin, as some of you guys know. I kind of ended up at this intersection of trying to figure out how to bring these two worlds together. So for me, it's really important and relevant. And I also study culture, anthropology. My PhD is sort of at the intersection of art, Buddhism, anthropology. But today I thought, we're talking about metaverses and art in a more general sense. And there are some really interesting developments that have been happening in recent years as well. So you can see that there are a lot of sort of interconnected aspects when it comes to traditional art meeting NFTs, because traditional artists and NFT artists, there are obviously a lot of overlaps, but they also come from very separate worlds and different separate cultures. Also, traditional galleries and NFT marketplaces, they are vehicles to show and sell art, but they have very, very different histories and different ways of working, and they interact in really interesting ways. You can see that there are some traditional galleries starting to develop their own marketplaces and things like this. And also traditional art collectors but in comparison to NFT collectors, they can have obviously some overlap, but they are also very distinct and have different motivations. And what's interesting is that we can see the coming together, here we go, of some of those worlds as well. And this is a really interesting slide that I borrowed from the dear Salvatan, aka Fabian. Some of you know him. He's incredible and lovely. And I found this visualization of some of the actors in Web3 really, really interesting to kind of give an idea of, okay, who are we dealing with here in Web3? And what is interesting for them in terms of collecting and creators and who is actually in the space, right? So we can see that there are builders, explorers, and investors as sort of broad topics. And in terms of art collection, one-of-one art collection, there is an investment aspect to it as well, but there's also sort of this exploratory and builder side as well, where you can see there is a lot of overlap. And a lot of the artists in the space also identify more as like explorers, or maybe they came into tech and they were exposed to art through NFTs and then started their own artistic journey. Some of them come from an artistic background. And so I thought this was a really interesting and valuable kind of visualization to think about, okay, who are some of the people in Web3 and how do they interact? Talking specifically about creators, explorers, and artists, we can see that, come on, there we go. A lot of artists have entered the NFT space for a lot of different reasons, but especially to be able to own your own artwork and have royalties. The fact that there's a lower barrier of entry are huge factors. Getting into galleries, as was just mentioned, is a huge challenge for a lot of people. But NFTs has given people a lot of accessibility, also in different countries that maybe they aren't able to exhibit or get the Aufmerksamkeit, the exposure. And you can see there's incredible artists from all over the world that have been able to enter the space and actually earn a living because of the low barrier to entry and royalties supporting them, for example, as well. There's also a lot more choice of distribution, choosing what kind of communities we want to be part of, what kind of blockchain, what kind of marketplaces we want to use, and also be able to trace your own artwork, which is revolutionary. Typically, you would sell your artwork, and then it's just kind of gone, and whatever happens, happens, and you don't really know. But with NFTs, you can really trace the ownership as well, which is a really important aspect, especially in terms of provenance and seeing how value is created as well. And community is also a huge aspect. It can be a very lonely road to be an artist, and having different communities of artists or different DAOs or within different blockchains can be really valuable and uplifting, because making art by yourself can be a real challenge, and having the support of a larger network is really, really valuable. So there are a lot of artists that are coming into the scene for that as well. What I find really interesting is that NFTs are also expanding our concept of art, right? Typically, you wouldn't see generative art in an exhibition in like a traditional gallery sense. So our idea of what art is also expanding through this medium. Typically, digital art, generative art, 3D art, animation, AI art, or 3D virtual reality art, or I've also forgotten AR as well in here. These pieces, these coming together with technology, wasn't necessarily something that people could collect or kind of see as similar to the traditional fine art world. So I think our idea of how we consider art is also really expanding thanks to this, and it's giving these kinds of artists a lot more opportunities and exposures as well. Where are we going? It's a little bit sticky. Come on. Oh, there we go. So in terms of collectors, I've seen in the last year especially that a lot of collectors have been a little bit burnt out from the PFP hype. You know, there's been a lot of rugs, there's a lot of getting burned from different things, and it's also just exhausting. And there are a lot of people that have kind of used PFPs or have had the experience where PFP collecting is a bit of a gateway into one-of-one collecting, because there are a lot of one-of-one artists in the space, and they're starting to realize that, hey, this is a longer term, I actually really love the artwork, I can be part of a different kind of community, I can support the artist. This is from a really interesting report that was done. It's called the Art Tech Report. It's online, free. It was done by a dear friend, and it's really worth checking out. And so they did a survey, and they looked at the collecting habits of one-of-one collectors. And so we can see, this is only a very brief snippet of some of the different graphs and data that they have. But some that I found were interesting is that, for example, here, the importance of profit potential when buying art NFTs, only 25% said that was an important factor, that it was going to grow as an investment, for example. So it means that typically they're more interested in the art itself, the concept, you know, the relationship with the artist, what it means to them. And here on the right-hand side, it says, what makes a good art NFT? And largely at 88%, it says a strong artistic concept. Whereas way down at the bottom, 26% said that it needs to be by an established artist from the traditional art world, which also shows that there is this divide between sort of the NFT artists and traditional artists. And having a traditional artist come into the NFT space, there are a lot of challenges that come with that. And you know, you might have a bit more of a following, but they are still very distinct worlds. And you can see that for NFT art collectors, it is not necessarily all that interesting. It's not something that makes a good art NFT if they are a well-known traditional artist. Also, you can see with 27%, it doesn't need to come with also a physical piece as well. I have no idea if this is too small to read, I'm sorry. It also doesn't need to, 39%, it doesn't need to be a one-of-one, but I think one-of-ones and smaller editions are obviously definitely preferred versus really large collections. But there's also, you know, a lot of interesting things you can do in terms of helping your collectors and doing, you know, interesting airdrops or giving some kind of NFT as an art pass and to be able to collect in different ways as well. So high quality resolution was important, and leveraging unique aspects of the technology is also important. We can see that in terms of like art blocks and also different kinds of artists that are playing with the creativity that comes with making NFTs and all the potential that you can use within that kind of technology. So some of the examples, I have no idea how much time I have left, by the way, start yelling at me. Christie's, of course, is a really big example. When Beeple came out, it was like, it took the world by storm, everyone was talking about it, and a lot of people got into NFTs because of that. Christie's is obviously a really big name. They have also just started their own Christie's 3.0 fully on-chain auction platform, la la la. So you can see some of these really big organizations pushing forward with it as well. And this exposes a lot more of the normies, the typical mainstream to NFTs as well, but it is also very much its own niche thing. But it's interesting to see the different areas that are especially the pioneers with this. A lot of big name artists as well are taking advantage, and Damien Hirst was burning his own artworks and kind of playing with this idea that, you can have the physical or you can have the NFT, but you have to choose. And of course, there's this whole performance element with it, and all of these different aspects where you can see how the traditional art is kind of coming into the NFT world, and some artists are starting to play with these themes and trying to figure out, okay, how can I be part of it? How can I push it forward? And also maybe in some ways because it's kind of trendy. Not at the moment, but, there are some museums as well that are taking advantage of using different technology to, do fractionalization. Like this piece, for example, the well-known Klimt Kiss. So they made a series of 10,000, and it supports the Belvedere Palace Museum. So you can also be part of the kind of community there. You can also gift it, and it's sort of this interesting interaction where you can have a relationship with this painting, right? You can say that, oh, I own square number 5687, for example. And it also comes with different kinds of utility. You have access to the museum. You have different kinds of benefits if you have it. And so the coming together of utility and fine art is another huge topic in and of itself, because, a lot of one-on-one artists say that, well, my art doesn't necessarily need a utility. It is art in its own right, and you enjoy it for the concept and the aesthetic appeal and all of the pieces to it. However, there is a strong push towards utility from the PFP space because everything hangs on utility. So there's a really interesting kind of tension and a lot of interesting discussions happening about utility in the one-on-one art space. And there are people also working on it as well. I know some artists, like the example I gave, where you have some kind of art pass and that gives you access to something else. But I also wanted to give a few local examples because I think it's interesting to also see what's happening in our own little bubble in Berlin. And I've noticed that there is a very slow, steady progress towards the coming together of one-on-one and traditional art galleries. You can see here in the bottom, Misa art has been developed by König Galerie, which is one of the largest, most prominent art galleries here in Berlin. And they've been on the NFT train for a long time. And they have their own platform, their own curated marketplace. A lot of you guys know Bright Moments, really bringing together sort of a very immersive experience and, creating this whole experience, sort of this moving NFT gallery. As well, there's a recent expedition X. God, today is it's rough. From NFT Meets Traditional Art, we did a show, we're just going to use the word show, at Berma von Luxberg Gallery with Kunstleben. And this is a contemporary art gallery in Charlottenburg. And so you can really see that the people that came to the opening, they were older, mature German collectors. They're in it's a very different world. And we really noticed, compared to some of the events that we do, a very, very different scene. But it was really fascinating to see sort of the interest in the coming together of these two worlds. And people were really curious, and they had no idea what an NFT was, but they were really willing to learn and were asking all kinds of questions. And some, of course, were pretty critical, but that's fine. Another interesting example is the Musée de Centrale. It's also based in Berlin. It's a metaverse gallery where, for example, the Musée de Centrale and the NFT Meets Traditional Art, we mirrored the shows in both locations. So the show that was happening in real life also was exhibited in Musée de Centrale as well. And personally, some of the things that I try to do is, here's an example from Bama Funduxberg, you can see. And Pop Kudam, we had a nice exhibition, and Assisi as well, and EVAC. So these are just a few examples we did. It was a very busy year. But being able to uplift NFT artists here locally, because it can be a real struggle to make it as an artist anyways, but to actually have your art shown and give it space and a bit of more exposure, I think is really important for NFT artists as well. Because traditional artists, that's typically how you do it. You have to go to a gallery and have your art exhibited. Whereas the NFT world, everything is very much online, and there is this magnetism towards meeting in person and having these in-person experiences, because we've been devoid of that for a very long time. And there's something really nice about being in a curated experience and being there with other people and seeing the art in a different kind of way. So I think it's just the beginning. I think we're going to see a lot more of this kind of coming together and experimentation of different art forms, different locations, different ways of immersing people in art, different ways of understanding digital ownership in terms of the whole phygital kind of world as well. And I think we're there. Do I have any time left? Oh, there's more questions, but I don't know if we have any time left. Anyways, it's fine. So I think because it is such a new area, some of the things that I find really interesting are trying to understand, okay, what are the different streams or landscapes of the art and culture ecosystem? For example, I gave the museum example, or, Christie's, different auction houses, different kinds of things like this. How are those different pieces of the ecosystems, how are they engaging with Web3 and NFTs? And also, I'm curious to know, what are the main challenges for traditional artists entering the NFT space? From my own experience, it was the huge tech hurdles, right? Even trying to figure out, what is a wallet? How do I transfer stuff? Like, what are these marketplaces? It's a huge technical undertaking that takes a lot of time and energy for someone who is not tech savvy to try to figure out. And there are also other hurdles in terms of marketing is very different in the NFT space. And also trying to understand, what are the hurdles for traditional galleries becoming engaged in NFTs? I know there's a lot of fear from different galleries in terms of that, this is just a fad, and they're very much rooted in traditional ways, because traditional art galleries, it is a very challenging business to be in. And there are a lot of hurdles that they go through even just to keep their doors open. And they are starting to notice that there is less and less interest as well. The younger generation doesn't enjoy going to galleries the same kind of way. So I think they are slowly becoming more comfortable with the idea of having digital art and different kinds of art experiences. And when they see that people are interested in it, and a lot of the people will show up for a gallery exhibit, that it's a lot more encouraging. So I think there are a few in terms of like the tech side is also really challenging. But I think there are some traditional galleries that are almost kind of maybe even considering getting engaged with NFTs. But it would be interesting to do a deeper dive and maybe even do some research in terms of what these galleries actually need in order to embrace it more. And also on the other side, to understand what are the challenges for NFT Web3 communities getting involved with the fine art space. Maybe because it has a very different Hochnäsig, maybe this like culture of high society and high tastes. It has a very specific aspect to it too. So what from both sides are some of the challenges? And yeah, but things to think about, things to consider. All right, there we go. We have a panel coming up. I see the ladies gathering, so I assume we are starting here soon. All right.